In this video, we're going to discuss why you are trained to retire poor, and more importantly, what you can do about it. Coming up next on Holy Schmidt.
Holy Schmidt!
We often don't realize it, but many of the habits and processes that we set up for our lives create a problem for us when we retire. This is because we live in a zero-sum world. If you spend $1, you don't have it anymore, but the company whose product or service you buy does have it, and they are pretty good at getting that dollar from you. I call this training, but another word for it is conditioning, and we are conditioned to spend money. The people who have these companies have advertising and other systems in place themselves that are really good at getting your funds out of your checking account and into theirs. So in this video, I'm going to talk about the 10 ways you might be trained/conditioned to retire poor, and more importantly, I'm going to show you what you can do about it. All right, let's go. First up, let's talk about information gaps. We live in a world where the quality of education and information varies depending on what access you have. For example, from an early age, someone who lives in a school district that has less experienced teachers, or frankly, less finances for things like books and activities, will have a disadvantage when compared to someone who is in a more affluent school district, all things being equal. The knock-on effect is less access to quality education and other information, which means lower paying jobs in many cases. Now, there's also a lot of misinformation about education. There's a lot of rhetoric out there that says you don't need a college education because you'll get deep in debt, and when you go deep in debt, you have to pay that debt off. There's truth to this. However, the fact is, someone with a college degree earns more on average, 70% more on average, than someone without a college degree. That's just the math. The rhetoric is around using that same time and money in building your own business. Now, if you happen to be really good at building a business, this strategy works really well because the sky's the limit when it comes to owning a business and selling products into the market. But remember, 4 out of 5 businesses fail within the first 5 years, I believe is the actual number, which means that the odds are against you from the get-go. Conversely, if you have a college education, it's pretty hard not to do better than you would have done financially if you didn't have a college education. But to be super clear here, you can also access high-paying jobs through trade education as well. For example, there is a really big bid, particularly in a place like New York City, for those in the elevator repair business, as you can imagine. Next up is easy availability of credit. It's hard to imagine a world where we don't have access to credit, but the fact is, it wasn't until about 1985 where interest rates were deregulated and access to credit became more prevalent. While access to credit cards and other personal loans can be quite useful for navigating life, they also create a situation where someone has debt at certain points in their life, particularly when they retire. The fact is, 47% of credit card holders carry a balance, and 65% of retirees have debt when they retire. What also exists today that didn't exist in the 70s and 80s in particular is we now live in a culture of immediate gratification. If you want it, you can probably have it, even if you have to pay for it with your credit card. Back then, you had to save for it. Relying on credit can also discourage budgeting and saving. The fact is, by delinking the act of purchasing from the immediate effect on your savings account or your checking account, you don't feel the pain for about 30 days, and it's a bit of a blur as to what on that credit card, if anything, or if everything, caused that pain. When borrowing is easy, we don't have the need to stick to a budget, leading to poor financial planning. And as you progress through life, higher interest means that a portion of our savings has to go to paying off high interest credit cards rather than going into a 401k or just enjoying life. The reduction or elimination of financial literacy as a course in high school is also a factor. You might remember home ec as a course, at least maybe your parents had it in the 50s and 60s, but in most high school curriculum today, it doesn't exist. Because of this, people today going into retirement or in retirement lack basic money management skills. Complex financial products and jargon make it even more difficult to make an informed financial decision, And today we seem to have delinked the concept of risk, that you could lose money from the product that you are putting your money into. So many people today believe that anything they see or hear is going to work because the world is moving really fast around them. Cultural and social norms are the next category, because today we live in a clickbait society, and therefore consumerism takes over common sense in many ways. The culture of keeping up with the Joneses, for many people anyway, seems to have replaced financial planning and long-term objectives in a family unit. Media is also to blame by encouraging people to live a rock and roll lifestyle. They make a lot less money if they encourage you to save your money and spend it prudently than if you spend it quickly on their product. And the lack of open discussion about money in families is troubling. It didn't used to be that way, but now the discussion of money is actually taboo in many households, which is unfortunate. Role models, particularly celebrities, often promote poor financial literacy because they have the funds to live the lifestyle that everybody wants to live, but they also make a bit more money than the rest of us. And more importantly, they never talk about the downside of the product or service that they're showcasing. They brazenly showcase their lives through luxury goods, exotic travel, and other attributes of their very expensive life that they can afford, many times anyway. Also, you don't see the other side of it with some of these celebrities. You've heard of them going bankrupt, of course, but you don't see the financial struggles that they're going through by trying to get to the next $10 million payout for the next movie, or trying to keep up with their other celebrity peers in terms of the spending and the lifestyle that they post on social media. And they very rarely talk about restraint when they're talking about their personal brand of tequila, the one that they own, for example, their designer clothes, or their restaurant. Some even promote risky behavior like the heavily reliance on debt or buying cryptocurrency as a strategy when they themselves don't really fully understand what they're talking to you about. The next is something called cognitive load, which is a fancy term that means that if you get burdened by debt and lifestyle, you actually do more of it to try to offset the pressure of having too much debt. A scarcity mindset often makes bad things worse. For someone who hasn't had a lot in their lives, if they have access to credit or a bit of extra capital, they tend to spend it very quickly to get that feeling of significance that we talked about earlier. And next, we live in an instant gratification society. I mentioned this a bit earlier, but let me explain what this really means. I remember when I was a child, I had the opportunity to buy a decoder ring. I think it was $9. I might have been 9 or 10 at the time, and I saw the ad on a bubblegum wrapper of all things. My allowance at the time was $1 a month. And so all summer I saved that money, and I got really excited about the decoder ring. At the end of the summer, I sent my $9 in, or frankly my parents did. I gave them the money, and I didn't think much more about the ring. In fact, when it arrived, I was excited, but it wasn't the level of excitement that I was expecting. It was the excitement of the build-up to get that ring that really drove me all summer. That's all I thought about. Today, for the most part, we live in an instant gratification society combined with lack of impulse control, because this is the way that everything is wired around us. Impulse spending depletes funds and frankly causes us to have a lesser retirement because we've spent on junk, frankly, and other tchotchkes, to use a term that I've heard from time to time. The biggest problem, of course, is that when you get in the cycle of spending on frivolous things, it's a hard to break cycle because you get used to having a package arrive from Amazon.com every few days. It's like Christmas over and over again. And of course, a lack of impulse control means that you're not saving, you're not budgeting, you're not building an emergency fund or engaging in other healthy activities which support a nice retirement. Next up, poor personal financial models. We talked about the celebrity role model a few minutes ago, but people have their own personal role models as well, namely their parents and their friends. If your parents never saved, they exhibited poor financial control, there's a good chance that you observe this, and at least part of that has been passed down to you. Now, frankly, you may have fought that and you are now doing well financially, but the tendency is that type of trait gets passed down from parent to child. The same holds true, and probably even more so, with your friends, because these are the people that you hang out with day to day. If they're spending their money frivolously, there's a good chance you'll do the same. Lastly, and most importantly, a lack of financial planning. The statistics on this point, by the way, are overwhelming. 2 out of 3 people don't have a budget and they don't plan for their future. That's 66%. That's a lot of people. Not understanding or taking advantage of some of the tax advantaged instruments like a 401k, an IRA, a Roth, for example, among other things, means that people aren't really managing their future correctly, the finances in their future correctly, and this leads to poor financial outcomes. They over-rely on Social Security because they think that that's going to be there to support their entire lifestyle, when the fact is, even the Social Security Administration says that Social Security represents about 35 to 40% of the average retiree's financial lifestyle. Proper planning means understanding what your future financial needs are going to be, setting realistic goals, and adjusting along the way to make sure that you're still on target. If you like this video, check out that video entitled "Why Many Baby Boomers Are in Financial Trouble. Is This You?" This is Jeff Schmidt. Thanks for watching.